Rebecca Lamb Weiss, Joni Lamb's youngest daughter, hasn't always been silent. In fact, there was a time when she was one of the loudest voices opposing her mother's decisions, particularly regarding her mom's relationship with Dr. Doug Weiss. Before Joni and Doug were married, Rebecca was already voicing serious concerns about the relationship and wasn't afraid to speak out about it. She felt that something wasn't right about it and did what many people wouldn't. She told her mom exactly how she felt. Now fast forward to the present, and people are beginning to notice something odd. Rebecca and her husband, JW, have been remarkably quiet lately. They distanced themselves from the commotion, and to be honest, that silence is confusing a lot of people. Shift, especially when things were so tense between them and Joni just a year ago. Now, a recently discovered audio recording may help explain things. This wasn't planned or staged. Rather, it was a private conversation that was made public. In it, Joni describes a heated confrontation with Rebecca that took place in May 2023, just weeks before Joni and Doug were married on June 10th. What this conversation revealed was that Rebecca stood her ground, that she was upset, not just a little irritated, but deeply concerned. Joni claims that the argument between them wasn't soft or sugar-coated. Rebecca didn't hold back. She confronted her mom directly about the decisions she was making and how they were affecting their family, their ministry, and even their public witness as Christian leaders. Mother to teach her that marrying Doug too soon, especially given the circumstances, wasn't a good idea. And just by hearing Joni's voice as she recounted the story, you could sense the weight of it. It wasn't just a disagreement. It was a daughter attempting to preserve what was left of her family's integrity. Anyway, Rebecca just exploded, saying, "I can't see the grandchildren anymore. I can't post anything." She went on in a mean way, saying, "I am full of the devil. I have demons that he cast a spell on me." She was telling me that it simply isn't going to happen, saying, "You guys just seem to get emotional time with one another and work through all this. Maybe not right now." But eventually I did tell her that she was entitled, self-absorbed, and selfish. Words over me. Well, after she compiled and railed, I tried to leave the driveway because Ash was listening to all of this, and they got out of the car. That's all I wanted, and I started to pull out when she opened the passenger door. "Please shut the door." So these are the things you want here. Accident, I have to leave the car and park, get out of my side, come around and shut the door. There's her and Asher standing there. I said, "Leave the door closed. I'm going. This is over." I returned to the driveway and she opened the door again, got out, went around, closed the door, and then I pulled out. I had no idea that encounter. If I had known no, the first time was good, but it took a turn for the worse when I said, "Mom," and she said, "You really hurt my feelings by kicking me out of the house." I told her that I didn't feel comfortable with you all going into the house without me being there while I was in Colorado, and she kept using the excuse, "Well, when you kick somebody in the house, they're in the house and you kick them out, right?" So that was the problem. I was talking to Jimmy about this, and he said, "Oh, no." She moved it back. "So is Doug?" She said, "I don't want Doug there." I replied, "If I pay for the party and it's at my house and he's here for the weekend, he's going to be there." This is where it gets even more serious. Joni Lamb, a well-known Christian figure with a national platform, admits in that same audio that Doug Weiss was already spending weekends at her house before they were even married. From a biblical standpoint, this is extremely problematic because 1 Thessalonians 5:22 advises us to avoid any appearance of evil. Whether or not people want to argue how far things went, it's about how it looked. And too many onlookers, it appeared as though boundaries were being crossed, especially for someone in spiritual leadership. Additionally, Joni herself acknowledged in earlier recordings that she and Doug were showing affection before the wedding, making out as some described. The bigger picture is that Rebecca wasn't being dramatic. She wasn't just acting like a jealous daughter or trying to control her mom's life. She was trying to hold Joni accountable to remind her of the values their family claimed to stand for. She was trying to protect the legacy her father helped build, a legacy rooted in faith, moral standards, and Christian integrity. And let's not forget the context. Joni was widowed shortly before this new romance began. Many people expected her to navigate a period of grief with grace and reflection, but instead she swiftly entered a new relationship that caused pain and confusion in her family. The timeline, the behavior, the broken trust, all of this is becoming clearer. This isn't just about family drama, it's about what happens when leaders abandon accountability, surround themselves with yes men, and prioritize their own desires over the people they're called to serve. As this story progresses, there's no doubt that more and more people are paying attention to how spiritual leadership is handled or not handled on Christian platforms across the nation. In the midst of all of this, many people are praying that the church will take seriously the call to live with honesty, humility, and holiness. Jesus stated in Luke 12, verse 2-3, that there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed or hidden that will not be made known. What's happening now is that the truth is being brought into the light. I mean, just the fact that you're heavily making out right away. Yeah, I don't apologize for that. Yes, we were making out because we wanted to see if there's anything wrong with that. We had talked for 60 hours in the month of July. That's high, I told. So if there's something wrong, Jimmy, is there something wrong with making out? I definitely kissed the ham out of him. So absolutely not. So what really blows people's minds is how Jimmy Evans, a well-known figure in the Christian marriage world, seemed completely fine with everything going on between Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss. It's not like Jimmy was just some guy in the background. This is someone who ran an entire ministry focused on helping couples build strong biblical marriages. He was supposed to be the one drawing the line and setting an example, but instead he looked the other way. Perhaps he didn't want to upset anyone. Perhaps he wanted to keep things amicable with Joni. Or perhaps, and this is the scary part, he simply didn't care anymore. For anyone trying to live according to Christian values, especially leaders who teach about purity and godly relationships, that's just plain wrong. He kind of loses credibility because he couldn't even hold his friends to the same standards he preached. But let's go back to something even more profound, the audio recording of Rebecca Lamb and her mother Joni. It says a lot and reveals a much bigger problem, a broken relationship between a mother and her children made worse by pride, power, and control. She said, "I don't want Doug there." I responded, "If I pay for the party and it's at my house and he's here for the weekend, he's gonna be there." That was the trigger. You told me he didn't have to. So I said, "I never told you that. You told me that, but I never told you I was gonna find that. You really need to set that boundary down. He's going to be in your family. You don't let her manipulate you like that. She tries it now and she'll try." Yeah, I actually discussed this with Junior. And he said, "You're taking away your 1-year-old grandson's birthday." I said. He heard her on the phone when she called me because she was yelling. Not because she was yelling, but because we were playing Scrabble. It wasn't said, "Here, listen to this non." And she wasn't even attempting to uncover her. Rebecca uncovered herself. I said, "I'll have it, but you're not going to manipulate me and tell me. You're not being a Christian mom and this is evil without eyes," she is screaming. I actually like Rebecca, but I was like, and I have been guilty of playing dad. I mean, I think she's trying to be a good mother, but, Rachel has been really respectful to me. She may be saying something completely different, but at least I respect that she's been nice to him. Rebecca was really rude to Doug when he was walking by. Yes, he just said hello. What is that? Think about it. Rebecca wasn't just voicing her opinion to argue. She was obviously worried. She loved her mom and saw things that didn't sit well with her. She spoke up in the hopes that her mom would listen, but Joni didn't. It's sad because the people who should have mattered most to her were being completely ignored. Rebecca and her siblings weren't strangers, they were family, and they had every right to voice their concerns, especially when their mother's decisions were happening so publicly and had spiritual ramifications. However, Joni acted as though their opinions didn't count, brushing them off and acting as though she knew better and didn't need their advice. One thing Joni said in that recording really stood out. She said that she didn't trust Rebecca to be in her home if she wasn't there. She seemed to surround herself with people who only told her what she wanted to hear. Speaks volumes. That's not something you say about someone you're close to. That's not a typical mother-daughter bond. That's someone trying to keep control, not build trust. It shows how distant their relationship really was. And honestly, that's the kind of distance that comes when money, fame, and platforms start to matter more than people. Somewhere along the way, Joni began creating a story to defend her relationship with Doug. She didn't want anyone, including her children, to get in the way. And the more people questioned it, the more determined she became to prove everyone wrong. You probably saw those headlines online that attempted to portray Joni and Doug's relationship as some lovely, divine love story. God brought them together. It was supernatural. They tried to turn it into a romantic miracle. But let's be honest, when you look past the parky or reels, there are some serious red flags among the glitzy words and emotional marketing. The relationship timeline, the physical things before marriage, the secrecy, the dismissal of family concerns, all of this adds up. And now here's where things get even more complicated. Rebecca, who was once so outspoken and bold in calling all of this out, has suddenly stopped posting, making videos, or making statements. For a while, people wondered why she stopped speaking up, but now we know that her brother, Jonathan Lamb, forced Rebecca to sign a non-disclosure agreement, or NDA. In other words, she was legally silenced. Joni knew that Rebecca would be a problem for the image they were trying to maintain. So instead of dealing with the truth rather than resolving the family conflict in a constructive and honest manner, Joni decided to offer money in exchange for silence. Let that sink in. A daughter's attempt to hold her mother accountable was paid off, preventing her from speaking the truth. That's not only disappointing, but heartbreaking. Rebecca obviously had strong beliefs. She didn't hesitate to speak up even when it was uncomfortable. What did she receive in return? A gag order and a contract that stated, "Stay quiet or else." This whole situation goes far beyond family drama. It's a reflection of what can happen when Christian platforms begin to resemble businesses rather than ministries, when appearances take precedence over facts, when silence is purchased and truth is suppressed, and we're left with many unanswered questions regarding leadership, accountability, and what it truly means to follow Jesus. Just in front of a camera, but behind closed doors. At the center of all of this is a family that has been deeply harmed, children who feel ignored, a mother who seems more concerned with defending her decisions than mending her home, and a community that is watching, confused, heartbroken, and unsure of whom to believe. However, one thing is clear. Even though Rebecca's silence may be legally enforced, her story and the truth behind it still matter, and even if she is unable to speak, others will, because this is about calling out hypocrisy, standing for the truth, and refusing to let power silence what is right. If the church is unable to do that, if leaders continue to prioritize loyalty to friends over loyalty to the truth, then we have much bigger issues to discuss. Try to dress them up. And this whole Jonathan Lamb situation is one of those things. There has been a lot of drama, a lot of accusations, and a lot of noise. But one thing that really sticks out is how Jonathan handled himself when it came to purchasing his home. He didn't take out a covert loan from Buyer. He didn't make any behind-the-scenes deals. He went into a regular bank like any other person, filled out the paperwork, and conducted his business the old-fashioned way. He owes no one anything, especially not the people trying to twist the story. He didn't try to use his last name or his connections to get special treatment. And while we're talking about integrity, let's not forgetting that this is the same Jonathan that Marcus Lamb, his own father, believed Marcus wasn't a fool. And let's not sugarcoat it. Marcus's death was barely over when things started to change. People didn't even wait for the man's memory to settle before they started tightening control and shifting leadership. And what did Joni do after her husband passed away? She started installing tracking devices on her own son and allegedly yelled at him for things as trivial as failing to reply to a celebratory email. That's where we are now. A man loses his father and is attempting to manage grief and leadership at the same time. And instead of support, he receives surveillance and reprimands. It's a depressing image that captures a lot about the real atmosphere that goes on behind the scenes. Since this isn't just about who got a loan or who reads their emails, it's about something more complex. Control, power, and money have a strange way of revealing people's true intentions. While money can build relationships, it can also destroy trust more quickly than anything else. In situations like this, money can be used as a weapon to keep people quiet, buy loyalty, and make uncomfortable truths disappear. This is exactly what seems to have happened in Rebecca Lamb's case. She wasn't just an angry voice on social media. She was raised in this family, so she knows how things work, and she wasn't just coming out swinging for no reason. She had serious concerns about her mom's relationship with Doug Weiss, and instead of being heard, she wasn't given a place to be open and honest. She wasn't given a place to be open and honest. Let that sink in. According to reports, with a check and a non-disclosure agreement and a contract, a daughter who is devastated by her family's disintegration is told to keep quiet or else that's not healing. That's not reconciliation, that's damage control. This kind of thing might work for a while. On the surface, things may seem calm. You silence the loudest voices. You pay off the people who know too much. You make it look like everything is under control. However, you know that that piece is fake. It's not real, and it never lasts because the truth is revealed. People begin to notice the gaps. They recall what Rebecca said before she went silent. They notice the change in Jonathan's role. They notice the way stories change. They notice the shift in Jonathan's role. And finally, everything comes to light. You can build the biggest platform, have the biggest budget, and surround yourself with supporters and smiling faces. But if the foundation is cracked, it will collapse. You can't buy your way out of that. What we're seeing here isn't just a family problem. It's a leadership problem, a heart problem, and it's a wake-up call for anyone who believes that image matters more than truth. Because in the end, what matters isn't who has the nicest house, who controls the email list, or who gets to... Jonathan didn't take the easy route. He didn't ask for a handout. He didn't compromise to keep the peace. Rebecca didn't remain silent until she was forced to. She fought to be heard. And all of us watching have a responsibility to look past appearances, ask tough questions, and value truth over reputation, because no matter how much money is tossed around, no matter how many contracts are signed, and no matter how polished the image may look on the outside, the truth will always come to the fore. What will be left standing when it does? Do you think this type of cover-up ever really work, or does it just make the crash that much louder when everything finally falls apart?